Good day, class, and welcome to our first meeting or our first lesson of your engineering mechanics 2 or ESci 1 to 4 or your dynamics of rigid bodies. And I welcome you all back here to our course. So today's lesson we are going to tackle about introduction to dynamics of rigid bodies. Now, in this lesson we will discuss the principles of dynamics and its importance in the field of engineering. So our learning outcomes for this lesson is at the end of this lesson, the students or you must be able to explain what is mechanics. Next is apply the fundamental concepts and unit of measurement in solving of dynamics problems. Next is explain what is dynamics and differentiate the branches of dynamics. So to begin, we are going to talk about first the definition of mechanics and fundamental concepts and unit of the measurement. So mechanics is actually a branch of physical sciences that is concerned with the state of rest or motion of bodies subjected to the action of forces. Now, to avoid confusion, no, like mechanics is a very wide scope of um, subject. So there's actually mechanics is subdivided into three parts: your mechanics of rigid bodies. Second is your mechanics of deformable bodies or your strength of materials. And lastly, your mechanics of fluids or basically fluid mechanics. No? So kaning duha muna, let's just set aside that and uh, siguro i-enroll na yung next sem or I don't know, another year or next year. But let's just focus here about mechanics of rigid bodies. Now, mechanics of rigid bodies is actually divided into two parts. This is your statics and your dynamics. Now, statics is concerned with the equilibrium of a body that is either at rest or moves with constant velocity. So medyo statics, when we say static at rest or um, its velocity is always constant, no? And if we talk about dynamics, is concerned with the accelerated motion of a body. So medyo tanan nagalihok na dira sa dynamics, so we are going to analyze. And our concern is just all about accelerated motion of a body. Okay? So dynamics is subdivided also into two parts, your kinematics and kinetics. So kinematics, which treats only the geometric aspects of the motion. So geometric, when we say geometric aspects lang, wala ta nag consider or like we neglect all the forces why it moves or like what cause it what forces what forces that causes this object or this rigid body to move, no? So kinematics we just focus on the motion itself, no? Ano lang. So, ang kinetics, medyo ano na, medyo daghan na ito i-consider the motion of the body and the forces that causes the body to move or forces causing the motion. So, in studying dynamics, no, you have to have this fundamental concepts, no? Okay, for sure it will help you to understand a better analysis of what is dynamics here. So let's start with the basic quantities. So your length, used to locate the position in space; time, conceive a succession of events; mass, a measure of a quantity of matter that is used to compare the action of one body to another. And lastly, the force is we consider that as a pull or push exerted by one body on another. So medyo familiar na kasagaran ng ato ang quantities here because of we already nasugatan na nato, no, sa static. So for your idealization here, there are three that we are going to understand a better sana, what is actually these ideas, no, when we talk about particles. So a particle, a very small amount of matter which may be assumed to occupy in a single point in space. So basically it has a mass, but its size can be neglected. So we are going to talk about sagaran particle, sagaran. So next is the rigid body. So it's a combination of a large number of particles. So mga siya kumpul-kumpul na particle, and with a fixed position in each another with each with another particle. So fixed lang siya, and then it occupies fixed positions with respect to each other. Pasabot, ano lang siya, combination of number of particles. Next is your concentrated force, which is medyo familiar na sa statics. No, kay kasagaran, concentrated force atong ipang gamit na to. So again, concentrated force represents the effect of a loading which is assumed to act at a point on a body. Okay. Next is another fundamental concept that is really useful here to understand dynamics. Is the Newton's laws of motion, and there are three laws, diba? We already know that. So in the first law, it says here that if the resultant force acting on a particle is zero, it will never move, diba? If wala gyud force nga nag-act sa ato ang particle, no? Specific particle, it will never move, no? The particle will remain at rest, no? If originally at rest, or if it moving na with a constant speed in a straight line. Okay? So, ano lang siya, ang first law. So, ang second law naman is concerned with the resultant force acting on a particle is zero. The particle will have an acceleration proportional, again, take note, will have an acceleration proportional to the magnitude of the resultant force na gi-apply adto nga particle and in direction of this resultant force. So again, we can just ipakita in this formula. Again, diba, more conform siya sa second law that the acceleration of the body will be proportional to the force or resultant force acting on the particle and its mass. Again, when we say second law, there are three parameters that we will going to consider: the force, mass, and the acceleration. And all of those parameters must be proportional to each other. Again, we can just represent that as a force times mass times acceleration. That's the whole thing for second law. Now, on third law, and again, take note class, when we dealing with formulas, again, please be careful with units. No? Kaya naman sa mga units, no? Kilograms, meter, Newton, yan na. So, again, I advise ko ninyo is be consistent on units. Although, di ko kailangan mag-require nga every figure na units, but at the end of your final answer must be sakto or parehata or like consistent ato ang result when we are going to answer a problem. Okay, be consistent on your units or system of units. Okay, next, the third law naman is the force of action and the action between bodies in contact have the same magnitude, same line of action, and opposite sense. So, ano lang kumbaga, the best dito is the Newton's law of gravitation. No, action reaction po na siya. So this states that the two particles of mass, first mass, no, your capital letter M and your small letter m, are mutually attracted with equally or equal and opposite forces of F and negative F of magnitude F given by the formula. So F is equals to G times M all over R squared. Capital letter M and small letter m, your mass of the first particle and the second particle all over the distance between them, of distance between the two particles. So G is universal constant called the constant of gravitation. Ito na makita na sa mga books, no? Nagana siya value, no? Nagana siya figure kung saan ang universal constant called the constant of gravitation. So now, a particular case of great importance of this law of gravitation is that the attraction of the Earth on a particle located in its surface. So, basically, moranig actually ang ato ang weight, no? When we say weight, it actually computed as mass times the acceleration due to gravity. And that acceleration due to gravity can be calculated with the use of Newton's laws of gravitation, which is G is actually equals to G, no? Constant of gravitation times the mass of the Earth all over R squared, no? That's the radius of the Earth mismo. And then your letter M or small letter M here as our mass, kunwari ikaw and the attraction from you to the Earth. So the mass of the Earth is the capital letter M, and your mass will be small letter M. And the force here will be assumed to be, or force is equal to weight, and this will be replaced by W as be your weight, no? And then whole G, M, and R square will be your G, small letter G, so it will be equal to this one. So W is equals to mass times acceleration due to gravity, which is, we already know that. This is actually computed na with multiply ang mass sa Earth, constant gravitation constant, and radius of the Earth squared. So it is actually calculated in SI standards or SI units is 9.81 meters per second squared. That's your acceleration due to gravity. No? Take note, acceleration na, so it must be meters per second squared. Now, in US customary naman, which is 32.2 if I'm not mistaken, foot per second squared. So, ano siya? So, we can actually calculate our weight. So, when we say weight, dili siya, di mo ingon, what is your weight? So, dili na to pwede answer of um, 2 kilograms. Or like, sa normal people, like, 20s nga age is na sa mga around 50 kilograms or less or more, no? 50 kilograms. So, kung may tanag, pila day mo weight. So, takay, kuan ni. So, na actually, in US customer, na gitaw a kilogram force. That's, kilogram force is, already, muna siyang Newton lang, no? Kung ako lang mo sa matres, na if magipangutana mo, weight, pilay mo weight, di actually correct, no? Muna siya, di siya actually correct if mo ingon ka og 50 kilograms. Now, in 50 kilograms, that's your mass. No? Kung pangutan mo weight, yung pa na times of 9.81 and your answer will be blah 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 Newton. No? Anyways, ana siya ang point anang weight. So actually there are two concept aning weight actually. So weight is your, again, timbang of a person or a particle or rigid body, and then another concept here is ang weight is the force that Earth exerted to you or to the object located on its surface. So actually, mo ni ang force na gina-exert sa Earth so that you na attraction nga mahitabo. So without this one, we are now flying in space. No? Kung wala ning attraction over Earth. So ano lang siya concept actually sa weight. Now, in systems of units here, class, you must be familiar sa mga prefix, no? Na gina-use that to I know you are already familiar with this, but it's just a recap or a refresh ba kung recall sa inyong SI prefixes. Ano lang siya. So, if you're talking kilo, it's about 1,000. Mega, it's about 1 million. And when we say giga, ano siya, a billion? Oh, yeah. And then, below that is deca, dc, centi, milli, and so on. Ano siya, be familiar with this one kay importante po siya. Diba? Kaya instead you were saying 1 million kilometers, you can 1 million meters, you can just say 1 megameters, no? Yung may 1,000 meters, you can just say 1 kilometer. Ano lang, or important sana. Now, in systems of units, there are two mainly used here sa dynamics, SI or International Standard of Units. SI units used in mechanics, no? I know familiar naman ni ng mga meters per second squared for acceleration, angle is rad per degrees, area with meter squared, force would be Newton, no? And then, second system of unit is the US customary unit, no? Na mga feet per second squared sa acceleration here. Yan, feet per second squared, area is feet squared. So, napod siya ay SI equivalent. So, if I think this is important, no? To be like familiar mo sa inyong ilahang equivalent sa SI2 customer. Kasi if you, kunwari, kung wala mo kahibaw sa formula, if you don't know the formula of that problem, you can actually use a unit analysis or dimensional analysis, no? Kung master na gid or like familiar na gid sa mga units, you can actually play those units, and then if unsa requires a problem from power, you're just going to divide the newton per newton meter per second. Di ba? If na may given nga newton, na may given nga meter, tas na may given nga time, or which is a second, and gipakita mo power, so di ba? We can just play about the units. So you're just going to multiply the newton to meter, tapos inyo divide sa time, which is second. So you can now have your watts or joules per second. Ano lang ako sabot sa system of units mo siya essential po siya in solving problems. If you don't know, if nakalimot mo sa formula, no? You can use unit analysis or dimensional analysis. Ano lang siya, ako lang give you importance. So, ano lang. So, for the next part of this lesson is, we're going to define the dynamics and the branches of it. Okay? So, what is dynamics? So, dynamics is a part of mechanics, diba? We earlier talked about it, no? It's a part of mechanics that deals with analysis of bodies in motion. Again, dynamics is the analysis move ng mga bodies, rigid bodies, particles, and all that will move. We were going to analyze it and solve it kung sa mga ganyan record. So that's your dynamics. Now, dynamics is divided again into two parts: your kinematics, which treats only the geometric aspects of the motion, and the kinetics, which is analysis of the forces causing the motion. So, medyo kalagian is forces lang, di ba? So, ang kinematics sila talk about sa forces, aralan ta sa mga geometric aspects like velocity, position, displacement, acceleration. So medyo wagi force nga maglawas nga to. Nga rin nata sa atong kinetics nga mag-involve na og mga work, energy, sana sa pala dira basta man na siya, basta mag-involve og forces, that's kinetic. Okay? Now, another what do you call this? Difference, no, ato like mga points or thoughts or like ideas sa kinematics versus kinetics is that again it treats again with the geometric aspect, and it relates mainly in displacement, velocity, acceleration, and time without the reference to the cause of motion or without force nga involved. Ano lang kasimple ang kinematics. Now, kinetics, nya rin na masulod ng atong atong forces, rather. So, this is the study of relation existing between the forces acting on the body, the mass of the body, and the motion of the body. So, that's your kinetics, no? It involves three parameters: your force, your mass, and the motion or the acceleration of the body. Actually, mo nang baga second law of motion, or like Newton's second law. Diba? We talk about that acceleration of the particle is directly proportional to the resultant force that on the particle and its mass, no? So ano lang baga ang kinetics, and it is used to predict the motion caused by the given force. So ma-predict na nato kung asa mo move or why did it move, or anong move siya, unsa nag-cause, what force should be required to produce a given motion, pila atong i-apply ng load so that it will move a certain distance from its initial point. So, ano lang siya, baga kinetics. And I think that's all for this lesson, no? And I hope you learned something from it. And then up next will be your rectilinear translation, which is under sa inyong kinematics of particle. So again, I'll see you next see you next lecture video, and I hope you learned something. And after this one, you can actually start solving or answering your quiz number 1 and assignment number 1. And I hope you did learn something for today's lesson or in these lecture videos. And if you have some questions, you can just via main messenger or email. And thank you for listening, class, and keep on learning.